Let's discuss printing and publishing during the Protestant Reformation. First off, how did printing work? Well, there's no copyright laws, there's no publishing laws, it's not regulated, and there's no book deals. So if you're an author, you do not get paid for your books. The cost of printing is all placed on the printer or publishing of the manuscript. So if you're a guy like Erasmus, and you wrote a book and you think it's good, you take it to a printer, and the printer decides if he wants to print it or not, if he thinks he can sell it. If he does, he'll do a run of about 800 to 1,200, somewhere where he needs to break even or make a profit, puts the finished product in his little wagon, and then travels from town to town selling the book to monasteries and universities, the people who could read and the places with libraries. Since some of the universities were run by monasteries, this made the majority of publications religious in nature. It was a lower risk of investment. Now, if the book was a good seller, chances are it would be picked up by other printers who would print it and take it on their book tours into their specific monasteries. Again, plagiarism or copyright, there isn't any laws over printing. So taking another printer's book and printing it for your own profit was common. That was the thing to do. This made going into publishing and printing an extremely risky endeavor. It was very costly, it was time-consuming, and it was not regulated. And you had to decide if the book was going to sell or not. If the book bombed, you, being the printer, had to suffer the loss. And many people will ask, well, if the author doesn't make any money, what is the motivation behind them writing books? And the answer is fame and notoriety. But a couple more key points about publishing at the Reformation time, 1517. One is that once you bought a book, if you were a monastery or university, you had to go to someone else to actually put a cover on it for your library. The cover was usually a wooden cover to go on top of your book. Two, the majority of publications were written in Latin, designed for people who could read, the monasteries and the university. And three, by the time Martin comes along, most monarchs and dukes and princes had printing presses of their own. Now, the illusion that we've been made to believe for centuries is that Martin's writings were just this wave of popularity, enlightenment, and emotion, freeing the people from the chains of bondage and the evil corruption of the church. And part of that's true. I'm not going to deny it wasn't popular. It was incredibly popular, but not without reason. The reason it was so popular is because there was a coordinated effort by the princes and dukes to propagandize the German peasants into believing that the Catholic Church was evil, to break away from the church. In fact, historians point out it's the first propaganda campaign in history. From the year 1517 to the year 1525, anti-Catholic propaganda outweighed pro-Catholic literature 5-1. And I make the distinction between propaganda and literature because the anti-Catholic stuff wasn't just manuscripts and literature. They were putting out wood carvings of anti-Catholic images, specifically for people who were illiterate. The propaganda was all written in German. Why was it written in German when the vast majority of commoners can't read? Well, it had nothing to do with book sales. Again, this had to do with power. So they would have town square readings, reading the anti-Catholic stuff to the people, as well as in the taverns. And that was one of the mistakes that the Catholic Church made. The pro-Catholic authors wrote in Latin designed for scholarly debate. Have you ever heard of these little books? Martin Luther talked about his little books during the debate, the Leipzig debate. I believe he also talked about it at the Diet of Worms. The bishops also talked about these little books. They were little manuscripts, and they weren't designed for libraries. They were written in German. They were designed for propaganda to read and throw away. Between the year 1517 and 1519, Martin Luther wrote 19 little books. Almost one, actually, it's more than once a month because they believe it started in January 1518. So he was writing little books, one a month, that were written in German, and they weren't designed for a monastery or a university to read. They were designed for a town square reading and throw it away. Another funny point about Martin Luther's little books is when he was exiled to the castle of Wartburg, he was writing these little books, and he wrote a letter back to his prince, Frederick the Wise, who I will talk about in a later episode. I'll go over all the characters. But he sent a letter to his assistant, Schwalatin, saying, "Why haven't you printed my little books?" Apparently, he had written about 5 more little books, and they hadn't printed them yet. And he was angry that they hadn't written them. He was reprimanding them because he wanted these little books out there. And my guess, this is just my guess, why they hadn't printed them is because they were so backed up with other stuff. Martin wasn't just the only one writing a bunch of crap during the Reformation. All his proteges were all writing stuff too. So my guess is that they were like, hey, we're a little backed up at this time. I mean, and also think about the printing press. You can't churn out that quickly, books that quickly. That's why they were little books. They didn't need a cover, and they were much cheaper. But yeah, just a funny little story I get a kick out of. After the destruction of the Peasants' War in 1525, printing just died down, I should say. And the reason why is because they saw what they did, what their propaganda did, and they stopped printing it. And not to mention, they got what they wanted. They took the property from the Catholic Church at that point. So in the next episode, I'll be going over some of the characters in this story of the Protestant Reformation, mainly Frederick the Wise and Martin Luther. Frederick the Wise was Martin Luther's prince. Frederick the Wise is the man behind the curtain, pushing all the buttons and pulling all the levers for the Protestant Reformation. Frederick is one of those electors that I spoke about in the last episode who got the lump sum lottery ticket in the election of 1519. Meanwhile, his puppet or his stooge, Martin Luther, would die in poverty. So I hope you found this interesting and hit the like button, but you know what? You be you. Have a great weekend.